Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
For type A folks like us who are used to believing that logic and thought and what our conscious brain can do is the sum game of progress, it can be difficult to accept that these breathing exercises, regulating our bodies, doing things like spider fingers, they're as important for the 36-year-old, 56-year-old as they are for the 6-year-old. Is there an area where you're currently intimidated or you think you can't learn it or you think it's only for the pros to learn about and you can't do it? That's a fixed mindset. You should assume even if you don't have the same knowledge as a lawyer, you can get smart enough. One of the most provocative things I ever heard was when Stephen Covey says, the person who takes action, they're not a little bit more effective. They're 5,000 times more effective. It's a massive shift, which is a tall claim to make. And I actually have found that to be true, that when we're not acting as agents, Pete, we lose all access to our intelligence, to our relationships, to our connections, to our problem solving, because we're thinking about something outside of us by definition that we don't control.
That's Mawi Asgedom. He's one of the world's leading experts on social emotional learning and also one of my very best friends and mentors. Mawi helps people develop the skills to live healthy and fulfilling lives. His latest project is InnerHeroesUniverse.com, which features powerful stories, art, and heroes who help kids, and to my surprise, me and other grown-ups, master their inner worlds to flourish amid life's stresses and challenges. So you'll learn 1, easy ways to keep your cool when things go awry. 2, the key investment that improves both happiness and success. And 3, the powerful reframe that makes you feel unstoppable. I'm Pete Makaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Mawi. Mawi, welcome back.
Oh, it is so good to be back, Pete.
This is crazy. So you were episode number 1. That was a wild 8 years ago on the show. We've been talking in between, but nobody else has been listening.
Hey, you know what? It is incredible. It's hard to believe. I still remember that first episode and, it's, 800 episodes later now? Like you've been at it, 900? How many have you done?
That's right, 940-ish. Totally.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's been fun to see the growth. I'm proud of you. It's so cool. I got to ask you, Pete, you've talked to so many world-class people throughout the years here. What has been the one most important or interesting learning that you've gotten? Let's flip the table on you. Get you to answer a question right off the bat. When you think about all the journey that you've had here, the whole journey.
If I boil it down to one thing, it's caring. Do you care? Do you care about your job, your colleagues, your teammates, your boss, your customers, your stakeholders, the investors? Do you care or do you not? It's like, I just got to get through the day. I got to try to get through the day, get to the paycheck. Versus when you care, it opens everything in terms of, well, why do I spend the time to learn this thing? Oh, because I care. Why do I really try to listen and understand where someone's coming from? Oh, because I care. Why do I invest in learning this stuff when it's hard or it's uncomfortable or it's unpleasant? Oh, because I want to improve. And so I think it just makes all the difference when folks are plugged into that versus just trying to get through it. And so many of the tidbits of advice in terms of being likable or being persuasive, if you just keep drilling down to the why, it's because this just matters to me. And being awesome at your job is sometimes quite literally a matter of life and death. And other times you're making an impact on a smaller level. I was just chatting with someone who sells lots and custom homes for like planned developments. And she says, for me, family is the most important thing. And a house is one of the most important things for a family's experience of family and togetherness. So it really matters to me. And it shows in terms of how excellent she was at what she was doing. So that's my soapbox. It really boils down to caring.
I think so. You're reminding me as you talk, Pete, I gave a keynote a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago at Vernon Hills High School in Illinois. They had all read my book, Beatles and Angels. And I gave what I thought was a great speech. And everybody was saying like, wow, that was great. And then one of the kids came up to me and said, hey, are you happy right now? Because you don't seem like you were really happy up there. I was like, wow, this kid could see right through me. I've been having like a bad streak. I hadn't been doing self-care and I really wasn't happy and it showed. And to your point, like it's a tough thing to hear from a kid after you've been paid to go present at their school, right? But then it forced you to hold up the mirror and answer the question that you just asked, really, like, how much do you care right now? And like, if you're not where you need to be in terms of your happiness, joy, energy, what you bring to the table, well, you need to step back and do something about it, right? And so that's one of the kind of like the stories I'll never forget from over the years. Yeah, that's great stuff. Well, it's good to be back, Pete. Like, man, the world of podcasting has changed. It was pretty nascent still when you were doing it. It was pre-pandemic when we did the first episode a while back, and to see just how much it's changed, right, and grown, and to be a part of that must be pretty cool for you.
It has been, and new fun opportunities have opened up, and it's been fun to explore those. And I want to talk about your new fun, cool thing, the Inner Heroes Universe. It's a series of books for children. So first, we should address, why are we talking about this on how to be awesome at your job? And it's not just because we're buddies. Even though we're buddies, I don't let people on who don't have something to say that sharpens the universal skills required to flourish at work. So lay it on us. You got a book for series for kids. I can see how it's useful for us grown folk, but tell us, what are we doing here today?
Well, look, I mean, I just asked you what the sum wisdom was that you collected from people in your 900 interviews with all sorts of leaders and CEOs about how to be successful in the world of work. And it came down to caring, which is really something that we should start picking up very early when you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, how you're raised, the things you're taught. And there are enduring lessons about all these things. And so in any case, like, what the whole Inner Heroes universe actually has tremendous application, I would argue, for the world of work and just for the world of humanity, of just being adults in life, because it's really rooted in psychology. And what I wanted to do, Pete, was my first company focused on what's called social emotional learning, which is the way that kids learn about things like mindset, relationships, goal setting, all the personal development kind of stuff that you talk about on your podcast, but from an education and kids lens. With the pandemic and the challenges that our country's had in the mental health area, I wanted to translate the world of psychology and that clinical world of psychology into simple, easy tools that kids could use. And those same tools can be used by your listeners. And we can talk about what that means in each of the 4 areas of psychology that we started with. But think of us as the Marvel universe of the inner world. Like that movie Inside Out that Pixar did, Pete, where it showed that young girl's inner journey, but it only focused on emotions. We're bringing the entire inner world to life through books, through media. And as we continue to talk, I'll share how these things are so relevant in 4 of the initial areas of our inner universe.
Well, that's so cool, and it's powerful, and I totally resonate with that. And we had Kwame Christian on the show. He's got the podcast Negotiate Anything, and he's so cool. I think in his book, No One Will Play With Me, he talks about our inner toddler. And I totally connect that notion, is that when I observe my own children and they're upset and yelling or crying because they can't play a game that they wanted to play, and we say, we're not really above that. I think we are experiencing the same kinds of feelings of disappointment, frustration. Oh, I was really looking forward to that, and this is being taken from me, and I'm angry. It's not fair. We're feeling all those things, and we just dressed it up a little bit more professionally in terms of, it's like, oh, this is a disappointing change in schedule. Is there a way we could return to the original agenda? And so I think that there's loads of truth to, we have an inner toddler, and the messages that connect for children and sometimes are among the most profoundly impactful to us at a deep, I don't know, limbic or something level of our human experience.
Exactly. I'll give you one specific example of how that works. In education and kid psychology, one of the things that we talk a lot about is regulation and dysregulation. And a good way to think about it is that as human beings, whether we're kids or adults, whether you're a 5-year-old or a CEO of a major company, when we go throughout our day, we all detect threats. Our nervous system, our bodies, like the way we evolved, has learned to wonder, hey, is that a lion over there? Is that lion going to come for me? Or is that just a tree? Like that kind of thing, right? And so we all respond differently when we see those threats, right? A lot of times when we're a kid, what psychologists talk about is the kid will go into like the red response or the blue response. Like that might be a kid who all of a sudden runs out of a room and the teacher doesn't know where they went. Or a kid gets really angry and won't let go of a point. Like they keep arguing. They have low inflexibility. They will not stop talking about something. I'm wondering if any of your listeners have ever worked with someone in their jobs that is inflexible. that gets attached to something, they won't let it go. They just will not let it go. Or when a conflict comes up, they just kind of like leave, they retreat, and they close off and they lose. What's happening there is that we're actually losing, like when you said limbic, we're losing access to our thinking brain and we're going more in that survivor mode. Well, with Inner Heroes Universe, what we do is we teach kids very basic, simple strategies to first reconnect with their bodies, because it's the body that's dysregulated, right? We try to talk to someone logically, right? And say, oh, like Johnny didn't mean to say that to you, or they didn't mean to exclude you. You're using logic. What really needs to happen is we need to connect to the body first. We teach kids things like spider fingers, or we teach kids things like box breathing. And you know what? Some of the best leadership thinkers working today with adults and CEOs. I don't know if you've had Shirzad from Positive Intelligence on your podcast. You got to get him on. He's one of my favorite thinkers. He sits down with CEOs and he just tells them, I want you to take 10 seconds and just feel each of your toes. Feel each one of your toes. What's he doing? He's turning the thinking brain off for a second and reconnecting people to their bodies. And when you do that, you actually think at a higher level. Like for type A folks like us, maybe many of your listeners who are used to believing that logic and thought and what our conscious brain can do is the sum game of progress and how we should think about things. It can be difficult to accept that these breathing exercises, regulating our bodies, doing things like spider fingers, they're as important for the 36-year-old, 56-year-old as they are for the 6-year-old. And it helps us lower our stress. It helps us kind of moderate the temperature of our bodies and our thought. And that's a very specific example, Pete, of where the world of kids is actually not that different from the world of adults.
Well, Maui, I'll totally second that. And it's really fun. We talked about spider fingers. My daughter, Mary, has done this. And I actually was not familiar with spider fingers before reading this book. And if listeners have not heard of it, it is the practice of simply touching your thumb to each of your fingers in succession. My thumb to my index, my thumb to my middle, my thumb to my ring finger, my thumb to my pinky. And just doing that with some awareness of this is how my body, my fingers are feeling, gets your brain in a different gear. And if you're feeling angry and you can't go take a walk, you could do spider fingers anywhere and everywhere. And I had not heard of this before. I have found that it's useful, and my daughter Mary has done it numerous times. So it was really cool. It's like these books are full of like superheroes, supervillains inside battling inside the kids' minds, and yet I'm learning useful stuff here. So spider fingers. Maui, tell us, where'd you even discover it? Like I Googled it and it wasn't all that common.
Yeah. So the way I discovered it is, so with Inner Heroes Universe, I hired a team of mental health experts that I work with very closely. And my criteria for them was they have to sit down with hundreds of kids every week. Like I didn't want someone who wrote research papers off in some university. No offense to those folks that are listening, but they weren't grounded in the reality of what kids experience every day. And what my mental health experts told us is the kids they see, they're having problems because someone's messing with them and they can't control their reaction to that. And they're getting in a lot of trouble in school, or they're having problems where they're not able to pay attention and their mind's wandering a lot and they're getting in trouble for that. Or they're having deep anxiety and they're afraid to go to school for any of a number of reasons. And so the spider fingers was actually created by one of my mental health experts, a woman named Carrie, came up with it. And my son uses it. I use it. But it's really like, how do we translate all these clinical tools that you have to go to a counselor to get them typically, or read a dense book on mental health? And how do we translate them and make them accessible for everybody using like art? So like this is an example of a book, right? Here's like some art, like with the characters, and making it interesting and fun. Pete, let me give probably my most stunning example of
please stun us.
Regulation from my career, okay?
All right.
I was working on the most important deal up to that point in my life, the most important deal I'd ever worked on, okay? And I was having a lot of problems. It was going very poorly. And I was really struggling. I consider myself to be somebody who gets along with like everybody, but sometimes when the stakes are really high, that other part of who we are comes out that we don't want to acknowledge. Maybe your listeners can identify with that. Like, hey, I'm usually a nice person. Everybody loves me. What just happened? How come like I'm having all these battles and people don't seem to like me anymore? And I can't get, well, a lot of times it's because something's at stake and you have to negotiate things and you're fighting over things. And what that does is that gets us more in that survivor brain I was talking about. And your thinking brain gets compromised. You think you're being logical, but you're not. So I described all this to a friend of mine who's a very, very wise woman named Ranjani. And I just said to her, I don't understand why I'm not getting any progress here. And you know what she said to me? She's a woman who teaches at a top business school. She didn't give me any business advice. She said, I want you to start every single day praying for the people that you feel are tormenting you and the problem with this thing not moving forward. I was like, it ain't gonna happen. Forget about it. Why would I do that? I'm right there wrong. It's pretty simple, okay? A neutral outsider looking in at the situation 99 out of 100 times would say Mawi's correct, they're wrong. I truly felt like that. Maybe some of your listener, can you identify with that? Have you been in situations where you're pretty sure you're right, you're being jacked up by some folks who shouldn't be doing whatever they're doing, and you're stuck there, and the last thing you're gonna do is waste a minute in the morning praying for these people, okay? I was desperate, Pete. I was at a point of desperation where I've tried everything else, but I tried it, Pete. No joke. Everything moves forward within like 5-6 days, things start moving forward. It turns out, unbeknownst to me, my own energy was having a lot bigger contribution than I thought. And by me praying for them, put that aside. What is that? That's a regulation technique, right? That's like I was dysregulated and didn't know it. I always thought I was being logical. I thought I was using my best intelligence. I was right. And then this is a simple technique of taking things away from my perspective, a simple act of getting on my knees and praying for someone else who I didn't think should be prayed for, changed my body, changed my energy, and the transaction ended up being one of the best in my career. So if it was just as smart as like me, like making an Excel sheet and mapping out the pros and cons, and that was the only way to think about business, then you wouldn't need something like Inner Heroes Universe. You wouldn't need that world of things, right? But it's not like that, right?
Yeah, that's powerful. So now, well, hey, I'm a believer in the power of prayer, but as you understand it, it's not so much that the Almighty parted the seas for you so much as you were putting out some, I don't know, hostile, contentious, unpleasant, difficult, inflexible, don't let me throw you too far under the bus here, Mawi, energies in the course of the negotiation, the conversations with this deal. And it was just getting things sort of jammed up. They're like, I don't really know how to make progress with this guy over on their side is what was going on. But then through the prayer, you got into a more chill vibe that we were able to have some back and forth and progress. Is that an accurate summary of what went down there?
Yeah, definitely. Another way of thinking about it was in my previous state, I had access to 70% of my intelligence. My previous state had got me so worked up, I thought I had access to 100%. And once I started praying, my energy shifted. I started to think differently, and I regained the 30 additional units I would need to understand where I was being inflexible, to understand, oh, well, if I don't like this person, I'm going to find ways to still get it done rather than just being mad at them. You know, like you're able to kind of like make additional distinctions. So it wasn't that the Almighty did this necessarily, not that I doubt the Almighty. I think that if there is a lesson from the Almighty here, it's that, hey, there might be a plank in your own eye, as scripture says, while you're looking at the peck of dust in somebody else's eye. And we have to take responsibility for that as leaders, right? Well, this is the same thing that we can teach a kid. If you're upset with somebody else, don't focus on them for a second, okay? Like, hey, let's do some box breathing. Let's do some spider fingers. And then after that, we have a few strategies for you that you can use to exit the situation. They're now available to you now that you're not completely dysregulated, right? And so it's similar because we all have bodies. We all have emotions. We all have feelings, and we all get stuck. The inflexible thinking is a big part of it. Inflexible thinking is a big problem that happens when you get so into somebody like being against you or out to get you or the enemy for a particular thing happening. We kind of get stuck in that quickstand of inflexible thinking that I think that prayer helps out. Yeah, and I think that would be something that would work, Pete, in my opinion, for someone who is an atheist, if they took time to just pray and think about wish good things upon that person is the way I would say it, right? And shift one's own energy, like that kind of thing. That makes sense?
It is good. And we said box breathing a couple of times. So just in case folks are not familiar, Mawi, what is box breathing?
Yeah, so I'm still learning a lot about this from the mental health experts. And it's a variety of breathing techniques like box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, where you're just counting your inhales and your exhales very intentionally. And you could say something like, for example, here's this book that I have here, right? And it's shaped like a box, right?
Yeah.
Like you could say that. And you could breathe in and out as you're noticing the contours of the box and feeling that alongside your hands. You can count as you're doing it. But the point is you want to pay attention to your breathing, right? So it's all these strategies that are intended to interrupt your thinking through your body or your mind. So for example, another one, Pete, might be like something like this. Hey, Pete, tell me your 3 favorite neighborhoods in the city of Chicago.
Oh, sure thing. Let's just go with East Lakeview, Wrigleyville, and Old Town.
Okay, so that's an example of something called ABC mindfulness we teach kids. You just ask someone to list off 3 things that you know they know about. And as they're thinking about those things, their mind kind of moves away from what they were focused on, right? And that's very useful for kids where you'd be like, hey, tell us your favorite Pokemon. As they're reciting the Pokemon, the 5 Pokemon, or if the kid is into roller coasters, tell us your 5 favorite roller coasters. They recite those roller coasters, their body's calming down because they're being distracted, and then they come back, you can ask them to engage in the problem. So whether it's the spider fingers, whether it's the breathing techniques, whether it's ABC mindfulness, each person listening to your podcast should have a repertoire of like 5 to 6 things that they can do. Like one simple one that I like to do that Shirzad talks about is from Positive Intelligence is just take your fingers and rub them closely so you can feel the contours of your fingers very closely. And I would literally, you can kind of feel it. I would literally do that under the table of certain meetings when I was getting stressed out. When someone was saying something I didn't like, I would just do that, calm myself before responding. Nobody knew I was doing it because under the table, right? Like while I'm sitting at a meeting, I'm calming myself, reminding myself, hey, let's do a little regulation before you jump to something with somebody, right? So that's kind of like what that world of regulation is all about. Have a few strategies that work for you.
So you mentioned that these books cover 4 areas. We've talked a good bit about the soothing, the regulation, which is handy if we're stressed, overwhelmed, getting angry at folks and not having our full intelligence. What are the 3 other areas?
Yeah, so we picked regulation because we're seeing so many challenges post-pandemic with that in schools and in society at large. Another one that's massive for today's world, Pete, is relationship and connection isolation. And so 2 of our characters deal with, one of our characters, bad guys, one villain is named ISO. We call him Khan, his named ISO. Then we have Link, whose job is to connect with people. And Pete, if there's anything we learned during the pandemic, I would say it's that we need each other. We need human connection. And the Surgeon General has said that loneliness and being isolated is the same as smoking or just being a heavy smoker in terms of like what it does for your life expectancy, for example. It's a devastating kind of issue. So I would say relationships are a key area. Like if regulation is the first area, relationships would be the second area. And I can double click on that if you like.
Well, yeah. So could you just give us a pro tip or tool that fits in there? Sort of like we talked about spider fingers for the regulation. Any relationship power tools?
Yeah, definitely. A couple power tools I would say is that pay attention to who your real champions are. What I mean by that is there's 3 to 5 people in your life, Pete, and in every listener's life that for whatever reason, these people have been there for you above and beyond what you might even think is deserved or there. These people are your ultimate champions. You might view yourself, let's say you're just like have amazing self-concept and you think of yourself as a 10 out of 10. These people think you're a 50 out of 10. They throw opportunities your way that are 50 out of 10. They treat you like that. And God has provided these people to each of us. I would say is like angels that help us, but a lot of times we don't really value them. We don't connect with them. We don't thank them. And following the 80-20 rule of understanding like who these people are, really over-invest in them, I would say, is a top relationship strategy, right? And I think everyone here can think about 2 or 3 folks in their network that have really done that for them. One thought that's been really helpful to me professionally is that, I mean, I know a lot of people, I've made a lot of friends professionally. It was hard for me to admit, Pete, that my relationships were atrophying, that my relationships were over time depreciating. I still know a lot of people, but I haven't talked to that person in 7 years. I haven't talked to that person in 4 years. They moved to a different country and they now have like, they're busy caring for their kids or whatever it might be, or they did this. And the reality is like, if I called them, they might be like, why is Mawi calling me? Because they thought either someone died or we just haven't talked for so long, right? So we have these rich relationships over our time, but then understanding that like, hey, we have to continuously, intentionally renew and build up our relationships. And so I was talking to you briefly before our interview, and I was telling you, for example, I joined a club that does cost money, a decent amount of money. There's been really helpful to me over the last year and a half. It's called 3i, that has really helped me connect with people all over the country, really fun. And it connects me with people that are more in my current stage of life. Like I sold my company, I'm post-job right now, really in how I live my life. And being able to connect with a lot of folks who are in that same kind of stage of life and have some of the same interests as me, has been a great fit for me. It doesn't mean I don't have my old friends or that I'm not connecting with folks, but I kind of like analyze currently from my current stage of life, what do I need? And I would ask every listener to do that. For your current stage of life, what are the new relationships you have to create? Where have things atrophied? Where have things depreciated? Where do you need to step up and really invest in it? I have 4 kids, Pete. And if they were to ask me, what's the single most important thing I can tell them other than like their life philosophy around their faith and things like that will help them the most? It's the people they have around them. Without any doubt, that's the thing in life that makes you happiest and most successful, is having those relationships, from mental health, from professional, from happiness. And so that's why we focus on this area. It's critical for kids. A lot of mental health challenges are rooted in relationship challenges, are accelerated by them. And as adults, we have to nurture our relationships, Pete.
All right. So we got regulation, we got relationships. What's next?
I'd say growth mindset is critical. Growth mindset has been defined many ways by many different people. I actually had a chance to work with Dr. Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset. I created an online class with her, went to her office at Stanford. And so I feel like I got really a bird's eye view of just everything that was happening at the industry, but also learning directly from her and her team. And growth mindset is really the idea that our skills and abilities, they're not fixed. They're malleable. They can always grow, that we can get better at anything. And the fixed mindset is that we can't grow. We can't get better at things. And we want to teach kids these concepts because a lot of them think they're not as good at math, or something like social anxiety where I don't have any friends. Well, we can help you make a friend. For anyone, any of your listeners who are anxious, for example, there's a lot of anxiety out there. One of the most powerful therapies and solutions is you don't run from the things that makes you anxious. You get exposure to it. And a lot of the counselors we work with, they actually help people take little steps to gain exposure to those things so they can build those muscles and grow. So professionally, the best one example I can give you of, Pete, of how this mindset really mattered for me, and I'd ask your listeners to think about this, is when I was selling my company, I engaged with DLA Piper to help me sell the company, just one of the top law firms in the country. And there was a part of me that wanted to think, I'm just going to let DLA Piper handle this, okay? Because that's what I'm paying them for. They're the best. Then one of my friends who's a lawyer who I really respect, who works at a really smart guy, works at a private equity firm, one of my high school friends, he told me, hey, you need to understand every single word in that contract, even if you didn't go to law school. Like it could be hundreds of pages. I don't care. You have to take it upon yourself as an intelligent person who believes they can learn about anything. So Pete, I did that. I made sure and if I had questions, I got them all answered. You'd be surprised how many people I found out sign something without having understood everything that's in it. Well, I'm agreeing to do this for this amount of money. Well, it's only because I had a growth mindset that I was able to do that I knew about growth mindset. Don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid. Don't say things like, I didn't go to law school, so I can't understand this. Don't say things like, well, if something's important, assume you can get better at it and learn about it. And that actually made the deal a lot better, because then I could ask a lot of questions and unearth sources of value and not be intimidated. So I'd ask the listeners, is there an area where you're currently intimidated, or you think you can't learn it, or you think it's only for the pros to learn about and you can't do it? That's a fixed mindset. You should assume, even if you don't have the same knowledge as a lawyer, you can get smart enough, like you can get smarter, you can get better at it to be able to make some progress in that critical area. So that's why growth mindset is critical for kids and adults. We all have to be aggressive, avid learners. I actually take it personally, Pete, like even with my kids, they're like, well, calculus, they'll take that when they're 17. I'm like, nope, I'll take that challenge. I'm going to teach my 5-year-old the basics of calculus. I'm going to get a couple boxes and I'm going to show them how to calculate the area outside. Then we're going to add those up. And that's basically what calculus is, kid. And you're going to be able to use this to estimate how much water's in that water tower in a few years when you take a class on this. But if you have that orientation that I'm so committed to believing that things can be learned, that I will even take on the challenge of assuming I can start to teach a 4-year-old calculus or a 6-year-old calculus. I'm not going to back down. It becomes part of one's professional orientation and life philosophy.
That's super. When it comes to growth mindset, it's funny. I think that in some ways, folks think, well, yeah, okay, I understand. There's a growth mindset, there's a fixed mindset, and the growth mindset means I believe that I can grow, learn, change, and improve. And fixed mindset believes, nope, you're either good or bad at a given thing. And so what I think is interesting, as I've reflected on this lately, is it's a lot more than just philosophically aligning yourself to the notion that, yes, a growth mindset is true in terms of what humanity is capable of at an individual, but rather like a day in, day out experience or mental discipline of like sometimes something happens like, oh, I feel like a loser. I'm just not any good at this. And it's funny, I will hear myself say these things to myself, and it's like, and I know that that's quote unquote wrong. Like, oh, that sounds like a fixed mindset. That's incorrect. I'm supposed to have a growth mindset. But so do you have any pro tips? If folks are like, yeah, I know what a growth mindset is, but sometimes I just totally fall back into thinking about things in a fixed mindset kind of a way. Any hot takes for when you're in the heat of battle there, what to do?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of those terms that's become a platitude that like everyone, oh yeah, growth mindset, have a growth mindset. A lot of folks have no idea what it is or how to think about it. And quite frankly, there's a lot of definitions of it flying around out there. So I was particularly grateful that I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Dweck and do a lot of research on it in my own life. Pete, one of the most useful ways I think about it that's really helpful is think of a circle, like imagine my fist here is a circle, okay? That represents, let's call that the can-do circle. That represents all the things we can currently do right now. Like I can speak a certain level of Spanish. I know how to make these kind of friends. And what we teach kids and we find to be really, really powerful is then to tell them, hey, look, outside of that's the not yet circle. That's the things you haven't mastered yet, right? And when you're feeling that feeling of frustration and despair, what we teach kids is that's actually like a really exciting thing. And that's where we can train ourselves to say, hey, that emotion that I'm feeling, that despair that I'm feeling, that's the signal for eventually, maybe not that second, we're going to process that. That's where our inner dragon slayer is going to come out and say, I can grow through this and pass this. It's like an exciting thing. And also understanding as human beings, it's only normal to fall back into the can. Everything you just described is perfectly part of the human experience. It's, I have a challenge. My business not getting the sales I wanted to get. I'm not getting the promotions. I'm trying to learn this new programming language and I'm not learning it. And that's when we have to ask ourselves, hey, are we going to push through? And so having those visuals of the can-do circle that's right there, but then right outside of it's that not yet circle. And then what I like to do, Pete, is I like to set a small goal into my not yet circle. Like, let's say I'm trying to grow sales. I'm not achieving my sales goals. I'm really frustrated. I'm feeling bad. Well, what I can do is I can set a small goal into my not yet circle and go into what we call the almost circle, just outside your can do circle is right there. And we'll set a goal. You know what? I'm just going to reach out to 7 people who I've already worked with in the past who know me to get advice about how I can think about this and how I can expand this. Maybe some of those will turn to sales. Maybe some of those won't, right? And then from there, I'll continue to grow. So I find, Pete, that taking those little actions in the almost circle, just outside the can-do circle, helps us to continuously grow at the margins and the edges. And that helps a lot. One of the tools we taught kids in my previous company that we still teach kids was, we'd say, set a MAD goal, a measurable, attainable, with a deadline, right? A goal that's measurable, attainable, and with a deadline. SMART goal is too confusing, all right? It's too many to remember, Pete. I can't remember 5 things.
That's 5 letters. I can't deal with that.
It's too many. It's too many. What you think this is? I'm going to have a fixed mindset there and say, I'm going to go to MAD goals because it's only 3, okay? Reduce that. But that's what I'd say. Set a MAD goal just outside your can-do circle and get into that not yet circle.
All right. Into the 4th area?
4th area is my favorite. Pete, you've heard me talk about the turbo button for a long time. And what that is it's this area of agency that as human beings, we're meant to be agents. That there's all these external things happening and things that make us feel like we're powerless. And all that does is it takes away our agency. It makes us feel like we can't do anything. And so it's a skill to constantly put oneself back into what we call the turbo zone, like hitting your turbo button, taking action, being able to move by focusing on what you can do, right? And we teach kids this because a lot of times kids feel like they're powerless. They live in a world that adults create. And they just have to find, and adults are making all the rules, tell them where to go. They got to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. They got to sit in a certain place. They got to eat the adult's kid. So they feel like they have no agency. Well, we show them how to capture that agency and how to recognize that. I actually thought that one of the most provocative things I ever heard in the world of leadership was when Stephen Covey, in his book, I believe it was 7 Habits, he says, the person who takes action, the person with high agency, they're not a little bit more effective. They're 5,000 times more effective. It's a massive shift, which is a tall claim to make. I mean, to go from twice as effective. And I actually have found that to be true, that when we're not acting as agents, Pete, we lose all access to our intelligence, to our relationships, to our connections, to our problem solving, because we're thinking about something outside of us by definition that we don't control. And so being able to shift back into agency land is a critical and fundamental tool for any professional who wants to accomplish a lot of things in their life.
That's cool. And I want to hear your favorite perspectives on how that's implemented. But one thing I find really handy is if I'm just sort of like tired, not feeling it, unmotivated, stressed, underslept, whatever, like all the things. I guess, hey, there's some self-regulation. But the question I like to ask myself is, how can I make all this suck 1% less?
I love it.
Because when I'm in that space, I don't feel like dreaming big dreams. I don't feel like much is possible. But I know there's always a little something I can do. It's like, well, you know what? I could drink a glass of water. You know what? I could stretch. You know what? It's dreary and raining outside and my eyeballs would appreciate some light. So I'm just going to point my eyes at a light bulb for a little while. And that's a little bit rejuvenating. And sure enough, I find that you just build that momentum. And so it's like little thing by little thing by little thing. It's like, you know what? I'm feeling okay. Let's go do something. And likewise, I think that's often the case with any number of domains. It's like, it's true. We don't have control over worldwide geopolitics. We don't. But what do we have control over? Oh, well, I guess I can tidy up this desk. And then I feel like I'm in control. I'm ready to rock and roll. So anyway, that's how I think about agency. What are some of your favorite moves?
It's a big one. And you're right. A lot of agency, the good news is that we can actually plan for a lot of these things. Like, for example, for our podcast today, I know I just perform better in general for anything that involves other people, anything that's recorded, anything where I'm speaking, if I've done a couple things. One of those things is like if I've done a workout. So I always do a workout before I have any, and that's an act of agency. Like I don't have to wait till I'm tired or depleted or having to recover. I just do that. And so I find that even 15 minutes is better than nothing. When you're talking about like, oh, I feel like I can't do enough, 15 minutes makes a big difference. If I really get my heart rate up for 15 minutes, bam, I'll just do that in a hotel room. If I don't have any weights with me, I'll do squats, push-ups, some circuit training in a room real quick. Pete, I have this master kind of like Google Doc for my life, like that I recommend to people. It has like 5 or 6 tabs. But one of those tabs is like things I'm grateful for. Things not just made up stuff like, oh yeah, I got to be grateful. Like things that I'm genuinely like, wow, I'm really grateful for. I have one of the tabs, Pete, has my worst performing financial year of my history since I was 22. And the reason I look at that is I can't help but feel tremendous gratitude. I say, hey, God, I'm not any smarter today than I was before. I'm not working any harder. And that Maui got that response, got that. And then this other Maui got this. I'm just going to choose to be grateful for that. And when you see those stark numbers of abysmal, I'm like looking at cell phone plans I can switch to try to save an extra like $3 a month to survive kind of thing, then you feel really grateful because you remember that. So I feel like you can build things into your life. And I try to look at that Google Sheet each morning while I look at the different tabs, including where I've been grateful, where things have been challenging, but where things have gone my way. I have a meditation in there, Pete, that I really like, that I look at each day. And so I think we can exercise a lot of turbo and agency in recognizing each day is a challenge, presents its own challenges. And we can also put some things in place to boost ourselves each day, to elevate our things each day. There's certain music that I listen to. It's not accidental that where I'm doing this call, like the way I structured my office, Pete, it's like out by some windows because I love light, right? And there's a guitar right behind me because I'll screw around on that a little bit. So I try to build into my work environment that if I needed to, I can just look out the window and feel a little happier because I love light. I got a little guitar I can screw around with real quick. If I'm in one of those moods you were talking about, it's literally 2 feet from me. I'll just grab it. I'll strum something real quick. I'll feel better. And so I think these are the kind of things that I would encourage your listeners to think about. How can you surround yourself with those little things? One thing I'll ask myself too, Pete, is for any situation, if I have the wherewithal, I feel stuck, I'll just say, okay, how can I turbo this thing? And that just means how can I operate from an internal locus of control instead of external locus of control? Because when you operate from the internal locus of control, it's like you got that turbo energy, like those movies where someone hits a button in the car and it zooms and flies, has all this energy that no one knew was there until that button got hit. Well, I'll ask myself, that's a good metaphor for me, Pete. I'll say, how can I turbo this thing? Like I'm stuck right now. I feel bad. And it could be play that guitar real quick, look out the window, take a walk, like all those little things. It could be like call a friend. That's a big one. Call a friend is a huge one. They'll change a different perspective. I'll be like, oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. So I think we all got to develop that toolkit to kind of boost ourselves in those moments, Pete.
All right. Well, now tell me anything you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things.
All right, Pete. So I know you got a lot of listeners out there, Pete, who are at different stages of their life. And now that I'm becoming few years, I'm going to be 50, Pete. I got 4 kids. Yeah. I got a kid who's a teenager. So you know what happens when you get a little older, Pete? You start to think, man, what are some of the things that I wish I would have known, right? So I actually wrote some of those down when I was a little bit younger, like that I would love to share with you listeners, just purely as an act of like, hey, maybe this is the only time I'll connect with them and this will help somebody out there, okay? A couple things that I think are interesting. This is random, okay? Random stuff that I came across, okay? Pete, I think it's really interesting that my biggest financial mistakes I've ever made in my life have been after I had my biggest financial wins. There's something that like lulls your brain, I believe. Like right after I got on the Oprah Winfrey Show when I was younger and I had a big book deal with a publisher in the same year, I was on top of the world. I had more money I ever thought. I made the dumbest financial moves. And it wasn't that I bought a Ferrari. I wish I would have. I just made really bad investments in things that I thought would work out. And they pretty much all went to zero. I felt like an idiot. And I say that with humility to all your listeners to say, hey, right when you have your biggest win, be extra humble and talk to your friends. What would have saved me was if I would have talked to my friends more, smart friends. Talk to your friends, take your time, don't rush. Just like, don't rush. You don't got to do anything. Okay. So that's one, Pete. Another one that I would say is in terms of entrepreneurship, I'd say my biggest leadership mistake, like CEO mistake, was being attached to things that weren't working for too long. Meaning like I would work on the same thing for 5 years and not pivot when the data was really clear that it wasn't getting traction. And like that thing I had in my heart from being a former refugee of like never give up, it actually can be a really bad idea. There are times to give up. When the data is all pointing in the same way, it's foolish to keep doing it again and again and again. You should pivot. And it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean that what you did should have never been done. It just means you're being intelligent. And I didn't understand that, Pete, because I was trained to always be a hard worker. And I believed one should never give up. And I believed if I could just work harder, things would work out. And that just was fundamentally wrong, okay? In some of those situations. And then in terms of like, I would say the thing that helped me the most, conversely to that is, where I showed the most wisdom was I noticed in a couple key instances when something was working better than it should have. And then once I saw that it was working better, I overinvested in that. That's how my company got into online education, and we became the market leader in social emotional learning from an online perspective, where we trained more students than anybody else before we sold the ACT. But that was all an industry I knew nothing about in terms of being online. But I kept kind of reinvesting in it as the data came in. So I'd say it's the converse of what I learned with the first business is be very curious and listen to the data, and don't be over attached emotionally, particularly if you're passionate about something. Be willing to shift. And I say that because I'd hate for there to be a brilliant listener out there who could have had so much impact had they pivoted a year earlier, 2 years earlier. And then they might think, well, I just wasn't cut out for that business. I wasn't good enough to succeed in that business, or I couldn't make it. Actually, that's not true. You could have made it. You were smart enough. You just need to adjust a little quicker. That's all. And you would have been fine. That's why I point that out. That's just something that I experienced as an entrepreneur.
Mawi's about to share some of his favorite things. One of my favorite things is our sponsors. Check them out. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. All right. And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
One that has been very useful to me and my 4 kids are those experiments, Pete, that basically show how addicting variable rewards are.
Oh, yeah.
So if you give a mouse some cheese and it's predictable, they'll stop asking for the cheese. Okay? It just won't. But if you vary when it gets the cheese, it'll keep hitting that lever until it dies, basically. And I show that to my kids because I wanted them to know that's how their phones are set up. Like all those notifications that come up every time I sign up for a notification, they're giving permission to somebody else to send them cheese and addict them at that person's choosing for their own interest.
All right. And a favorite book?
In the world of fiction, which I'm a big fantasy science fiction advocate, there's a tremendous author named Robert Jordan. Really sad kind of thing, though. He wrote like this 15-book series, but he died after the 14th book. So somebody else had to finish book 15. It's like it's like a huge mega seller. Actually, Amazon's making a series of his called Wheel of Time. You can watch a couple seasons.
Oh, yeah.
It's really cool. But his best book that he wrote, in my opinion, is called The Dragon Reborn. And the reason I like that story, Pete, is it's just an incredible fairy tale for adults. And then in terms of like personal development, the book that I think had the most impact on me, although I didn't like it the first time I read it, I really didn't. I thought it was just boring. I couldn't get through it. But then I read it again, and I mentioned it before, but I really like that 7 Habits book. I like that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That book makes a lot of sense to me, Pete.
Tell us, do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
A lot of us end up doing what we're doing because we thought it'd make our parents happy. We thought it's what we should do. We felt like we had to do it. And I'm at a spot now where a lot of my friends are asking like, hey, did I even want to do this? Like, why did I do this in the first place? I never wanted to do this. And it's been pretty tough for me to kind of help my friends think through that. So I'd say, particularly for those who are younger, but at any age, really, like, are you doing what you really want to do? Because we only live once. And it would be really sad to have spent that entire time not at all doing what you want to do. To me, that's sad. And so take some time to reflect and think about, what do you really want to do? What is it? And it's not something that anybody else can answer. Nobody else on the planet can answer that other than the listener who's hearing that question. And being honest with yourself. And then if you're not doing what you want to do, well, what are you going to do about it? It doesn't mean you have to quit your job, but like, what are you going to do about it? Right. And being honest with yourself about that, because that's been one of the joys of my life, Pete, I would say, is I have gotten to do what I want to do. And it's been a joy to like work with kids and to feel like I'm doing what I wanted to do. Even when I was broke, I could wake up and say, hey, I'm doing what I want to do, which gave me a lot of joy. Right.
Beautiful. Well, Mawi, this is fun. Keep doing your awesomeness, hitting the turbo button, being an inner hero. This is awesome.
Hey, fantastic to be on with you again, Pete, and look forward to the next time. Maybe episode 1742 we'll be back on.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's a good one, right? We'll be back on. Thank you. Keep it up, Pete.
Ever since this interview, I have been feeling the ridges on my fingers just about every day and sometimes multiple times a day. And it's kind of funny that I don't think I've ever noticed those before in 40 years of life. But now I do, and I find it is an excellent little activity that requires enough attention to notice that it's hard to pay attention to much else. And yet it's also not hard. So it exists in a really cool sweet spot and can be done anytime, anywhere. So one of many delightful tactics from Mawi. If you want to get a summary write-up of this conversation, please sign up for the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. These go right to your email box, and you also unlock the whole archive of 945 of these summary write-ups, the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. And if you want to see the particular transcript and links and such for this episode, that's found at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP945. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.